You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by listeners like you, supporters on Patreon. Join us today at patreon.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 438, Parallax.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we examine an episode of Star Trek in order to explore the morals, meanings, and messages.
This week, we'll be a pair of hosts for Parallax, the one in which there's a pair of Voyagers, and someone has to sort out which one to take home.
We'll discuss all that and more as soon as I tell you how to reach us. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Twitter and Facebook at Mission Log Pod. While you're at it, leave us a review and a rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And please remember, your comments could be used on Mission Log or Engage on the Roddenberry YouTube channel. And now let's get back to the journey with John Champion with this week's trivia.
Well, thank you. Trivia for this week's episode, Parallax. We have a story by Jim Trombetta, and there's a name that we've heard before. He got his start in the 80s with a couple of credits on Miami Vice, and in the 90s, he turns in 5 stories for Deep Space Nine, the last of which was in Season 2 with Playing God. This episode of Voyager is his final Trek credit, and it's actually his final professional writing credit overall. We have a teleplay by Brannon Braga. Well, we mentioned in the last episode that Brannon was keenly interested in how Voyager's development was coming along. While it was Michael Piller, Rick Berman, and Jerry Taylor who shaped the pilot, Brannon was partly on vacation when Caretaker was written, but he still had some say in what made it to air. As a producer and longtime writer for the franchise, though, it was understandably quick that he would have his own writing credit on the series. The episode was directed by Kim Friedman. Hey, it's been a while since we've talked about Kim. She got her start as a director in the 70s, mostly on sitcoms, and she even directed 8 episodes of The Love Boat. Her first foray into science fiction was directing DS9, where she turned in 6 episodes between seasons 2 and 5. She will be on Voyager for a total of 4 episodes, and you may remember way back from trivia in a previous Mission Log that Kim's daughter runs the Instagram account at Crazy Jewish Mom with the texts that they exchange, and it's hilarious. Go check it out. Now, originally, this story was called Ghost Ship, and it started with the pitch of another ship being trapped in a singularity, and Voyager has to go get it out. That changed over time, and some of the effects-heavy needs were pared down a bit. And really, Brannon's goal here was to start shaping the crew early on and to use moments in this episode to firm up the core cast, getting the Maquis crew integrated into Starfleet. That all took shape once he decided that the trap ship was really Voyager itself instead of an alien vessel. And here we are, just one regular episode into the season, and we have a bottle show. Now, it makes sense. A lot of time and money were spent on the pilot, so you got to start making some of that up. We have our second in the crew spotlight, Robert Beltran. It's time to meet Chakotay. Robert is from Bakersfield, California, and his parents immigrated from Mexico. He did go for a theater arts degree, and pretty early in his career, he started getting cast in some important movies. His debut was in Louis Valdez's 1981 film Zoot Suit, and by 1982, he was working with Paul Bartel on the cult classic Eating Raoul. Robert played Raoul, by the way. Over the years, he worked with Bartel many more times, and he started picking up guest and recurring roles on TV, like his gig the year before Voyager started as Lieutenant Soto on Models, Inc. In addition to his non-Trek work, Robert has returned to the universe a few times since Voyager. He was in the short comedy Roddenberry on Patrol, the fan film Renegades, and he has a current gig as Chakotay on Star Trek Prodigy, bringing it all full circle. Now let's meet our guest stars. Josh Clark plays Lieutenant Carey. He might look slightly familiar. He had a small role in the TNG Season 1 episode Justice, and all those years later he returns to the franchise as Carey. We did see him in Caretaker, and he will be back. Now, is he the same character that we saw at Tactical in Justice? Well, that's just for your headcanon to decide. And we also meet Seska, played by Martha Hackett. The name may sound familiar, but this is a new character for her. We did first see Martha in DS9 as the Romulan Torul in The Search, Parts 1 and 2. She also turns up in a couple of Trek video games, and we will see more of Seska as this becomes a recurring character for the first 3 seasons, plus a little more as we get toward the end.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. No Klingons, no Romulans, no Andorians, no lawyers and shower curtains. Things are gonna get weird on us real quick.
Prologue. In a bit of an outburst, B'Elanna Torres has punched Lieutenant Carey right in the face, sending the engineer to sickbay. Chakotay confronts his friend and crewmate in her quarters with the warning that she's got to get it together if she wants to avoid time in the brig, and especially if she wants to be chief engineer, which, by the way, is totally Chakotay's idea that he's pitching to the captain. Surprise! Act 1. The senior staff meet to give their updates, and things are tough. Not all of Voyager's systems are operating, which leads to some novel suggestions. Neelix and Kes crash the meeting and have the excellent idea of setting up a hydroponic garden to grow food which Neelix will cook. Tom Paris is given the task of learning some field medicine to be of use where the holographic doctor can't go. Chakotay has his crew suggestions, like putting B'Elanna in charge of engineering, to which Janeway seems more than a little surprised. They're interrupted by a violent shudder, a distortion in the space-time continuum. Janeway knows right away it's a Type 4, which is at least worse than a Type 3. There's a transmission coming from a vessel trapped within, but it's so distorted nobody can make it out, and they can't get too close to the ship without endangering Voyager. Chakotay calls up engineering, and B'Elanna has an idea, rigging up a kind of subspace tractor beam that could cut through all the distortion and tow the stranded ship out. But just to be sure, and going through the chain of command, Captain Janeway asks Lieutenant Carey what he thinks. It could work, so he's in charge of the project. So now Janeway needs to have a word with Chakotay, in private. Yeah, you do not make an end run around the captain, especially when it looks like Chakotay is treating the former Maquis as his crew and not part of the Voyager crew. He says Janeway's not making it any easier, not allowing any of the Maquis to have positions of responsibility except for him. Chakotay sticks by his guns. The captain won't ever have the loyalty of the Maquis if she doesn't show them respect. Janeway dismisses her first officer, and that, my friends, is how permission to speak freely sometimes gets ruined for everyone. Act 2. Cass stops by sickbay to pick up some soil samples that she'll use in setting up the hydroponics bay, but while there she notices something is off about the doctor. He has shrunk. From the time she entered, he's 10 centimeters shorter, and a diagnostic reveals the same thing. Something must be wrong with the holographic projector, but the ops team, okay, that's just Harry Kim, is too busy to deal with it just now, because just now the tractor beam is online and ready for a test. It works perfectly, until the moment it doesn't. The singularity starts pulling Voyager toward it, and with the tractor beam on at full, the power fluctuations threaten to rip the ship apart. They'll have to shut everything down, and Captain Janeway decides to rely on her local guide, that would be Neelix, who has a handle on some locals who may be able to help. So they lay in a course for the Illidaria system. During their travel time, B'Elanna is summoned to the captain's ready room. Janeway wants to get to know her engineering chief candidate a little better, and it doesn't go very well. B'Elanna admits right away that she doesn't think she can work under the conditions of a Starfleet ship. Maybe she just doesn't have what it takes to work well with others, to be in command, and she quit the academy because she wanted nothing to do with Starfleet then or now. She storms off in a huff. Just as the doctor requests a video call with the captain, he's still shrinking. Nobody has come down to fix his holo emitters, and what's more, he's had calls from 9 crew members who are having headaches and other symptoms. Janeway says that could be related to the quantum singularity that's been sending out these spatial distortions, something that the doctor says he should have been told about as soon as it happened. He's right, but there's no time to debate it because, speak of the quantum, there's another violent shudder to the ship. And even after traveling so far away, Voyager finds itself strangely in front of the exact same singularity it had left. Act 3. They are right back where they started. Captain Janeway orders that Voyager warp away, but no matter what direction or how fast, that singularity is right in front of them. She calls a meeting of senior staff to go over all the data, including Lieutenant Carey and, at Chakotay's insistence, B'Elanna Torres. Those two are still jockeying for position, with Carey telling Torres he's still in charge. The tension between them is fodder for gossip on the rest of the ship, including Ensign Kim, who's trying to get more out of Tuvok. In mid-conversation, Kim is struck with a sudden, painful headache, same as more than 60 other crew members, and the doctor has no handle on how to solve it, and he's still shrinking. Also struggling to find answers are the senior staff. They're stuck with what to do, but it's Torres who has an idea relating what's happening with the doctor to the rest of the ship. If the phase alignment of his emitters is being distorted by the spatial anomaly, then they could set up a damping field. If they're right, the same kind of field could be applied to the ship's sensors and allow them to hear from the other ships stuck out there in the event horizon. Torres and Carey are given the order to work together on that problem, giving way to a knowing nod between Chakotay and Janeway as the meeting is dismissed. The experiment works, and the distortion gives way to a message from the other ship. It's Janeway's own voice from earlier, and it's Voyager stuck in the event horizon. Act 4. Here's where it goes wibbly-wobbly. That other Voyager out there is them, stuck in space, but it's more of a reflection of them. Captain Janeway sent the opening hail 9 hours ago to that ship, but there they are. Yeah, it's weird, and Janeway explains that in temporal mechanics, sometimes effect can precede the cause. That's all interesting in theory, but the reality is that they've got about 9 hours to escape this thing until the anomaly crushes their ship. Presumably, they made a hole in it with their first encounter, which should be a weak spot where they can keep muscling their way through, and in order to see it, they'll flood the area with warp particles. So they do, and they find a rupture, and it's too small for the ship to fit through. Plan B. Torres says they could make the rupture bigger if they could force it open with a Dacon beam, but Voyager is too far away to make that happen. A shuttle will do the trick, and the best people to do the job are Janeway and Torres. With a few minutes to spare, B'Elanna takes a moment to open up to Janeway and apologize for their earlier tense discussion. She admits she quit the academy because she knew she couldn't make it in Starfleet. But Janeway says she's selling herself short. Her old professor left a letter in Torres' record stating that he'd support her if she ever reapplied, which is news to Torres. There were a lot of people at the academy who saw her potential. The shuttle gets closer to the rift, and those violent distortions get stronger and stronger. With the Dacon beam activated, though, they're able to open up that rift barely wide enough for Voyager to fit through, but all the banging around has caused another problem. The shuttle communications are knocked out. And when the shuttle heads back to rendezvous, there's Voyager and another Voyager. One's real, the other is a reflection, but they've only got time to make one choice. Impulsively, Torres says it's the one to port, but Janeway reasons it's the one to starboard, and, well, thank goodness she was right. On board, the rupture is getting smaller and smaller, which leaves them with one chance to force their way through. It's a bumpy trip, but Voyager emerges from the other side. Voyager will be fine, and especially since she's got a new chief engineer, that would be B'Elanna Torres, she's got a job ahead of her, getting the warp engines back online and taking command of her crew. That means clearing the air with Lieutenant Carey as well, who offers his congratulations. In sickbay, the doctor is still lower priority, though. He's shrunk down to maybe half a meter, standing in a chair, just begging for someone to come have a look at his holo emitters. The end.
Nice tight recap, John, because
thank you.
You know, we're just a pair of guys talking about a parallax. I loved your joke. I'm stealing it. I'm flat out just shamelessly stealing your wit.
Okay, I had two friends. When I lived in Chicago, I had two friends who were going for a simultaneous doctorate degree, and part of their gimmick was just referring to each other as a paradox. Boom. Yeah.
Thank you, John. John's going to be here all night. Make sure you try the veal.
Yeah.
And tip your waiter or waitress.
Thank you. Yes.
So here's a tip. The doctor may want to change his bedside manner just a little bit. And I'm sure that's going to be part of his character development, but no one does a brusque and completely fed up doctor the way that Picardo does the EMH. Just shoving Carey down, broken nose on face, doesn't care. You're my patient. I'm going to treat you. Just let me do my thing. Right?
It's like a mechanic fixing a car.
Yeah.
You just like banging things into place, and
I can't wait for the first person to say, like, is this going to hurt, Doc? And he's to say, absolutely, excruciatingly. Now, sit down.
Right. right. And hey, I do have to say it's early. I don't know if it's too early in the run or maybe just the right timing in the run here. This is our second time in the Delta Quadrant with Voyager, and there's already talk of mutiny from the former Maquis. Hey. In a darker Star Trek, that would probably be a constant undercurrent, but here they are just being pretty open with it.
Yeah, you never know how the winds are going to kind of blow right now with the crew and the way that the crew is all mixed in. One thing I did like, though, at the very beginning during the cold opening is a lot of different uniform zipper pull heights, across the different crew members. But I'll tell you one thing, man.
Yeah.
Tim Russ, or Tuvok, he looked as neat as a pin. And I think that just wanted, like, between he and Chakotay, you saw one who was, okay, I'll zip this thing up. I don't care. I'll walk around, get things done. Tuvok was like the complete opposite. It's like, I want to show you exactly how exacting the discipline of Starfleet is. And I think that's kind of starts the tone of the episode a little bit.
That is a really interesting detail. And I have to wonder, was that something decided early on by that combination of, producer, not so much writer in this case, but a producer writer like Brannon or Michael Piller, and wardrobe and or actors to say, like, well, okay, this character would wear this uniform this way, whereas another character would wear the uniform a different way. In TNG, we didn't see that. Nope. The only difference is that Worf had his bandolier on.
Right.
And then in DS9, we rarely saw any variation in the uniforms.
Well, it just depends on where Sisko wanted to put his communicator that day.
Right.
Either on his heart or underneath his armit. So it really depends.
Yes, exactly.
That. But we're past that. We've moved past that now.
We're past that.
Completely different uniforms here.
Yes, yeah. But it's a good, because if it is a decision, it's a good decision. It says, like, oh, okay, these are characters coming at this from different places in their lives. Plus, we're in this far-off place, kind of all the rules, not that the rules are suspended, but that sort of common goal, that kind of understanding may be shaken up a little bit here. Yeah. So, yeah.
And that just kind of, again, it speaks to the discipline levels or expectations of the crew. Speaking of discipline expectations. So Neelix just barges into a staff meeting, which I think is hilarious because he's not Starfleet, he's not Maquis, he's just Neelix. And his feelings were hurt. Nick, someone want to tell me I'm Chief Talaxian on this ship? It's like senior Talaxian. She's senior Ocampan.
Yeah.
I love that. I also loved how Janeway just says, yeah, you want the responsibility for growing food? Take it.
Yeah.
I got a ship to get home. Take your food and go.
Well, okay, so I love that she does that. Everything in Janeway in that scene is played out right. Mm-hmm. She's surprised that they come in. She graciously welcomes them in, all right, empowers them to go do this. But she also says, like, yes, you're welcome here this time.
Yeah.
It's still sort of asserting that power correctly.
Right. They didn't know, but they do now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. There is, this is a weird one, and it feels a little strange even to bring it up. There's this awkward bit of writing and blocking where I feel like they were kind of going for a joke. And see if you remember this. Picture this in your head. Mm-hmm. So they encounter the event horizon with this other ship, and then Cass goes, "What's an event horizon?" And then Neelix literally starts walking her around the bridge with his hand on her neck, explaining, to Lax-explaining, I don't know, mansplaining, And it's just awkward.
Yeah.
And I know that they were trying to go for this little bit of humor that, oh, look, he talks too much until somebody shuts him up. But it's almost like that meme of, somebody at a game. It's like a big beefy guy and he's, he got his hand in his girlfriend's face explaining something. And it makes me a bit uncomfortable.
It's the well, actually.
Yeah.
But also, John, this could be an opportunity to turn this into, well, you see Timmy moment. We haven't had a you see Timmy moment in a long time.
Yeah. Well, okay. And that that kind of weird, awkward exposition moment, like you always have to have those, and particularly in a show like Star Trek where you have these big ideas you have to get across succinctly, which I'll come back to later.
Yeah, it's not the only one in this episode.
No. Yeah. So you do have to have those, but it was strange to make that a character moment, and particularly to make it that character moment.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to the doctor here a moment, because 2,000 medical resources and 47 physicians, as he says it, the embodiment of modern medicine. And this is just the coolest idea to me, because if you go way back in mission log history, and there have been conversations about kind of the promise of AI, and I even remember this is years ago, talking about how cool it is you could have a computer like Watson win Jeopardy, because Watson is just pulling from all these different resources to try to come up with what is likely the best and, more importantly, correct answer here. And I think in a medical field, that is just the world is crying out for that kind of thing. Right. That is the future that I want to see.
Mm-hmm. Okay. With that, though, it's like, if you have all of these resources at your disposal, I mean, I think that you expect that to work, right? I mean, you have these you have Moriarty, like the Sherlock Holmes' greatest, criminal antagonist and enemy, and with every single ounce of Sherlock Holmes data pumped into this character to the point where it becomes sentient and escapes the holodeck. Yeah. Why wouldn't this guy be literally the embodiment of modern medical science?
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny that, he doesn't have bedside manner, but he's very sensitive, which, by the way, is very interesting when Cass refers to him as a person, which is a lovely little detail. And it was also, I thought, in that first one, how she recognizes him shrinking, because that first shot from the bookcase or from the shelves is behind.
Right.
And then you switch the camera around to see him on the other side, and you can actually see that difference. So, I thought that was a nice little detail.
I don't know how sharp your eyes are. My eyes aren't that sharp. I really couldn't tell if somebody shrank 10 centimeters in front of me.
No. I wouldn't be able to call it.
But maybe that's important to Ocampan's sensitivity. That may pay off later. It's just one of those small details where that's interesting.
I mean, look, we have the misfortune of being raised in a country where we abandoned the metric system. So already that's very hard to tell, and I try. Believe me, I try. But even with my imperial measurements, I'm terrible at that kind of if I'm driving down the street and I've got iOS maps telling me where to go, and it says turn left in 500 feet or a quarter mile. I don't understand those distances. I'm just like I don't, is that 10 seconds from now? I have no idea. So you just tell me where the light is and where to turn, and then I'll do it.
Yeah, like half a foot I could probably get, but I don't know. What is 10 centimeters? What is that?
Somewhere between half a foot and the length of this room.
Okay.
That's then.
Sorry, our European friends out there, or friends across the sea that use the metric system.
We tried. We tried for one moment in like 1979, and then it just failed. Yeah. All right. Speaking of Cass, by the way, and how observant she is, she does go into the doctor's sickbay there to ask him for a soil sample, a nitrogenated soil sample. Can I just remind everybody that she's setting up a hydroponics bay?
And a whole lot more.
Okay, I want to see the whole lot more, because hydroponics, by definition, means you don't need soil. So
maybe
just throw that out
maybe
there.
she's using it for something that Neelix needs.
All right, I'm just saying I'm the but actually guy now.
But actually, I really like how Chakotay stands up for Torres in representing her agency in the department heads meeting. Bring in Carey, bring in Torres to let the captain decide whose ideas are going to win the day, because we're trying to get home here. It's not about rank, it's not about privilege, it's not about position, it's about who has the best idea. And I like how he fights for that. I really, really do. I also like the fact that we saw kind of like what Tuvok was up to when he was hanging out with the Maquis, when Janeway said, Tuvok got all of your records, and I read all the data that he was able to get from underneath your noses. I thought that was pretty cool.
That was a clever detail.
Yeah.
I dug that. Oh, come on. All right. The Doctor is on Channel 47. Guys, retroactively, I say this to you writing this in the 1990s, lay off 47 for a minute. You get one per episode.
Right.
That's what you get. And that doesn't mean you have to use it in every episode. But if you do, you only get one.
So there's an interesting thing that it was a cut scene where they cut from one act to another act. Now, it's when they realize that they're staring at Voyager on the event horizon, and they're pinging basically their message back to each other.
Yeah.
Prior to the commercial cut, it was standard lighting. After the commercial cut, it was red alert lighting.
I did not notice that.
But there was no red alert actually ordered by the captain for whatever reason. So in the background, you could see on the security station the red alert lighting going off. Not necessarily klaxons, but it went from bright to dark with the red accents of red alert.
Oh, interesting. I didn't notice that. So we have to assume then either that is something you're supposed to fill in with your head. Could have been a scene that was shot.
Right.
And not used.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah. Speaking of the how Voyager works, there was such a tiny thing that stuck out to me when Carey says that they go up to that meeting on Deck 1. And now Deck 1 is where the bridge is. That's where the ready room is, and or wherever this conference room is, somewhere bridge adjacent. Voyager counting its decks from top to bottom with numbers rather than letters is an interesting idea, because I haven't honestly paid that close attention to other ships in the fleet. But just thinking back, okay, I believe you've got decks on the Enterprise labeled with, and I'm talking to old school Enterprise, labeled with letters, because most often on ships, you got A deck on down, A, B, C, D, going from top down. On a lot of modern ships, you're actually going like a building from a number up. So you starting at the bottom, and you count numbers all the way up. And there was a time, remember in Star Trek V, I know I'm sorry to bring it up.
Use the rockets!
Yeah, you got deck 78 on a 15-deck ship or 18-deck ship or whatever it is. So it's a weird little bit of inconsistency. Although, if people tell me like, no, we've been counting top down with numbers on X number of ships, or does it just apply to certain classes of vessels? But it just seems a little weird that Star Trek has not had a kind of dyed-in-the-wool consistency about that sort of thing.
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand with uniforms. New uniforms, new deck nomenclature.
Sure.
Bada bing.
Sure.
Bada bing.
I'm just saying, like, if I were assigned from a ship that was counting bottom up and then top down, it would take me at least a couple of weeks to get used to that.
It would take me an understanding of the metric system to get used to that.
Yeah. Probably so. Probably. Yeah.
So remember that moment when Neelix was Timmy-splaining to Kes what the spatial anomaly is? Well,
Yes.
Tom pretty much has that same moment later on where he literally like recaps everything in this episode right to the point where like, let me get this straight. Because a lot of exposition, a lot of kind of like, technobabbly stuff happens. So he's just kind of like, whoa. Everyone catch up right as soon as I say, let me get this straight.
Right.
And explanation.
But to their credit, they had a decent analogy in there with the reflection on the ice,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt very natural for him to just say, like, what am I getting wrong here?
Well, sure.
And acting like, wait, am I the only guy at the table here who doesn't get it? Because in that moment, he is us.
Right.
And that was good. But that's a better use of that bit of necessary exposition.
But it's like your 47 moment. Like, you should only really have one of those an episode.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because too many is like, that's just an ask too many to be like, oh, nice job. We're just getting splained the entire episode.
Yeah.
Trek-splained.
Hey, look, dumb idea, and I know retroactively it doesn't do any good in asking, but could the shuttle have just piloted itself through the rift and just followed Voyager?
I don't know.
Just Voyager go and like the shuttle say, hey, we're done, and that'd be the plan from then on. Like, hey, you punch a hole through that thing, and we're just going to follow you. Or there might have been another way to figure out how to get that thing back on board. Anyway, I don't want to rewrite the episode. Not at that point. Although it's kind of funny, Janeway saying sometimes you have to punch your way through. Cut to it's punching through and the ship is being torn apart and people are knocked around the bridge and the shields fail. It's like, okay, all right, stop punching. Seriously, just like a moment, stop punching.
I'll tell you what, I think even before the warp engines, maybe Carrie and B'Elanna need to kind of team up and take care of the inertial dampeners, because those things got a workout. I mean, I've never seen a crew get shaken around that hard since the Enterprise D bridge, hit Viridian 3. Right? I mean,
they
were getting tossed around on the floor, rolling around. I mean, Beltran was like going for the handholds, and he was selling it.
So here's something funny, though, that I left out of trivia, which is that the director, Kim Friedman, sent all the actors a videotape of an episode of DS9 that she had directed, in which there was, maybe on Defiant or something, like shaking, stuff falling apart, and she was like, here's what I want you to do. Like, here's how serious this is when we get to this point. So, dutifully, the actors watched it. And, okay, we're going to throw ourselves around.
She should have showed him that, the one scene from The Wrath of Khan where that one bridge crew member goes, like across the screen.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, God, that's the one.
Selling it. That's selling it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I also really like how Torres, when she's finally promoted to chief engineer, handles Carrie so graciously at the end. That's a nice learning moment for Torres. It's good character building. And it also, and I'm going to get to this point a bit later on, it also shows how Starfleet treated her and how she learned from that moment and didn't want to treat him in that same fashion.
I look forward to that part of our discussion.
Welcome to engineering. That's a nice nose you have there. It would be a shame if anything had to happen to it.
Hey, we will get right back to Parallax in a moment, but first, a big thank you to everyone who has joined us on the Mission Log Patreon at patreon.com/Mission Log. Norm, so much happening.
So much happening and so much to be thankful for. So many people to be thankful for. It's really wonderful to see the community grow and grow in leaps and bounds, probably to the expectations that, John, have been exceeded from both you and I since we started this. And it's really heartwarming because it's really taken a momentum and a life of its own where our fans and our friends have become these great communities. They've come together. They've found like interests. And I think that they're finding friendships both on and off, being in Discord, being online, And even meeting with each other in real life, it's really, really wonderful to see.
Yeah, and look, we've made a real commitment to make sure that we're there to hang out and chat and do things like our weekly Mission Log After Dark, where we get to have a discussion about that week's episode with all of you. And, look, honestly, sometimes it's about the episode. Sometimes it's just to hang out, and that's okay too, because we love seeing everybody. But also putting exclusive content in Patreon that is just for you. Doesn't mean that we're putting anything less in the main Mission Log feed, but it means that there is even more to be found when you sign up at Patreon. So big thank you to some of our more recent members who have joined: Jane, Morgan, Daniel, Nicholas, Doug, Ryan, Robert, Tim, Ricardo. Thank you all. That is just the tip of the iceberg, and we are so grateful that you have joined us there and have shown your faces in our Discord, which is exclusive to our Patreon members. All right, Norman, you brought it up in the last segment, and I feel like this is really the biggest point of discussion in this episode, but it has so much to do with this relationship, this professional relationship with Torres and Janeway, and how Torres is finding her life now on Voyager and under the Starfleet rules and regulations, and now getting promoted to being chief engineer. So right off the bat, I'm sort of looking at this from the production reality, and I feel like this is where story and production are having a run-in. B'Elanna is a great character, and we know that she is one of the characters, well, one of the actors in the main cast. We're only 2 episodes in, though, and she has punched someone in the face, and now she's getting promoted. It was an interesting reveal to get to know her in Caretaker just a little bit. We see her in the context of the Maquis ship. We see her in the context of that Ocampa kind of medical facility, and she's losing it. And she even says to Kim, like, being half Klingon, that is not all it's cracked up to be. She's got some issues like dealing with her own impulses, So this is all very interesting stuff in the background for her. But I kind of wish that we got to sit with that longer before giving her this promotion. Because, look, there was a certain elegance to putting Chakotay in his position. And we justify that pretty well, that he has the background, he's been through Starfleet Academy, he has some seniority, even though he's done this thing which is borderline criminal, but we're bringing him in this case. And yes, Janeway is making a statement to her now mixed crew by saying, here's somebody who is my second in command, who is from you. And I feel like, as I said in last episode, that was a great moment in spelling out that Chakotay owes Tom Paris his life. I think that was masterfully handled. And I love Chakotay slapping down his mutinous Maquis crewmates. But we get to this point with B'Elanna. Would it have killed us to give her a little more time before she becomes chief engineer?
That's a good point. And I think maybe in the serialization of Voyager so far, from Caretaker, to Parallax, I did not pay attention to the star date at the very beginning, so I don't know how much time has passed between now and then. I think that for the sake of exposition and the sake of getting everyone in their roles very early, I think that I can understand why. I understand, and I completely agree with having her earn her way into the position a little bit more. Maybe the shuttlecraft trip and being able to fix the problem with Janeway and science their way through it. Maybe that was a really good stepping stone to building that trust with Janeway. But I really think that they're trying to establish a certain hierarchy of how Janeway needs to trust Chakotay, how Chakotay needs to, establish that trust down the chain of command very quickly, just in order to keep the story moving along. I don't really know how how stretched out the Maquis storyline is going to be. I've only really seen this kind of once, so I don't really remember it. A lot of this stuff is new to me too. But what I do like about Janeway's decision to promote B'Elanna is she is accepting that she made a snap judgment in error because she is a Starfleet elitist at the beginning of the episode. She is Starfleet. She said this to Chakotay. Starfleet officers have worked their entire lives to earn their commissions. How am I supposed to ask them to accept a Maquis as their superior just because circumstances forced us together? That in and of itself is an oxymoron because they earned their commissions by discipline, and the captain orders the discipline to her favor. So if they are true Starfleet officers, they have to accept Chakotay being a Maquis officer and a Starfleet officer because that's what she orders them to do. That's what Starfleet is accepting. That's her definition of the discipline of the commission that they've earned. So she's like, I don't care how they feel. I'm ordering them to accept you. Period. That should be good enough for Chakotay, understanding the rules of command, and it should be good enough for all the other officers, understanding the discipline of the chain of command that Janeway is establishing at the beginning. But in empowering B'Elanna and then promoting her is basically saying, I made a mistake saying that. It's time for me to think differently.
Well, which is all well and good, but so let me phrase it this way. I mean, take Starfleet out of it, take the Maquis out of it, and regardless of the situation, you have somebody in a position of command, position of power, with this opportunity to create or reshape the structure within her command. Okay. So how much weight then do we apply to inherent skill and her background in engineering and her natural talent versus the other really important skill, which is command ability? It is leadership ability. So, for example, Captain Janeway doesn't have to be the best pilot. She doesn't have to be the best scientist. She doesn't have to be the best any one particular role, because you have people like Paris and like Tuvok under her command who are giving her good information in order to make good decisions. So Janeway's strength has to be somebody who has leadership ability. And Torres
and trust is a big part of that.
Trust is a big part of that. And again, this is sort of this weirdly academic conversation because the reality is, say, TV show that has to move its star, one of its stars into the role that she was written to play, But if we treat it as a real world thing for a minute, doing something like having that meeting where you have both Carey and Torres there, fine. You force them to work together. They have to work together. Either you're putting B'Elanna in a position where she has to, where the person under her, Carey, has to accept her leadership and not be a jerk about it, or flip it, and it's the same situation. They both have to learn that ability. Or maybe there's another candidate that we haven't even looked at yet who has the stronger leadership ability. So
both Carey and B'Elanna, they both did each other wrong. Obviously B'Elanna did it physically, and Carey did it almost passive aggressively, saying like, "Hey," he goes, "Sorry, you're not going to be in the leadership meeting because you're not a leader."
Yeah,
right. So that was a dig at her, and rightfully so, because he's probably still smarting from the broken nose. That almost ended up hemorrhaging his brain. Or to Chakotay's description. So, but in the end, though, I think that with B'Elanna in place, I think what Janeway is saying is we can't afford to look down our noses as Starfleet officers to people that have the potential of doing better. After Janeway read Torres's file and read the chief engineer's notes on how brilliant Torres was as a student who never got the chance, maybe it's because too many Starfleet people pushed her down and kind of covered her brilliance up to the point where they gaslit her to believing that she'll be no good at all to anybody. And Chakotay gave her the chance, which is why he's the only person that maybe these Maquis will listen to, because these Maquis Starfleet or not, are the only ones that Chakotay has given a chance to any kind of respect.
And I love this idea. I love the idea of giving somebody a chance and letting them grow to match the challenge, letting them grow into the role. I just also look at it and go, well, wait, a few hours ago you broke somebody's nose. And, so does that, if you're somebody else working in that department, and to be fair, at the very end, Janeway does say, hey, I've already gotten 2 complaints from people, complaining about my decision to promote B'Elanna Torres, not directly complaints about Torres, but about the decision, which again is perfectly fair, because if I'm one of those other crewmen, I'm thinking, do I have somebody who I can trust in the role above me? Or if I speak out, if I have a contrary opinion, am I going to get my nose broken too? Because I would not expect that from a Starfleet officer who maybe had gone through the same training that I have.
The interesting thing, and I think that a fact that we shouldn't gloss over, is that Carey wasn't chief engineer.
Right. Yep.
Chief engineer died, in the explosion. So basically he's kind of engineer de facto just because there's no other chief officer in that position. Yep. So he's not even legitimately in a command position to command anybody because he's not the chief of that department per se. He just inherited the department because he was just the next senior ranking officer. Mm-hmm. But I kind of wanted to turn this around a little bit and focus on, if there's supposed to be one Starfleet crew, then why the different pip badges? Right? Mm-hmm. It's essentially, if there's supposed to be one Starfleet crew, they might as well just put the Maquis in different uniforms, or just one similar colored uniform for all Maquis, maybe just an all black uniform, because they haven't earned the Starfleet commission. I don't really understand where they were going with the distinction, the visual distinction of, if you have pips, you're Starfleet officer. If you have the long oblong bar with the rank insignia in there, you're Maquis.
Yeah, because who does that help?
It doesn't help anybody. It basically it keeps the separation there. If you look at somebody and you don't really recognize them in your crew, and you see that they're wearing a different rank structure than you, like literally different, not a different pip, but an actual different bar, then you're going to form an opinion about these people that you don't even know based solely on the visual distinction of what they're wearing.
This is also speaking to kind of the weird production realities of Star Trek, that everybody needs a logo. Even the Borg have a logo, which it just doesn't make any sense at all. But, the Maquis are displaced people. The Maquis is not an organization. They're not an academy, or, yes, they do operate in this quasi-military, almost like, well, depending on what they're up to that day, terrorist cells. But, just the idea that they would slap a logo on a Starfleet uniform and that sort of answers everything is an odd choice.
But here's the thing, though, and here's the weird tiebreaker of this visual stylization, or the way to separate the two. Tom Paris was dishonorably discharged from Starfleet, thrown into prison, joined the Maquis, but got his rank and commission back at the end of Caretaker. He wears the Starfleet insignia and pips. He is just as much a criminal as Chakotay is. Yeah. So why didn't Chakotay at the end, helping save Voyager from the Caretaker and putting his life on the line, literally transporting out in the last minute and destroying his own ship, not earn him the same respect of rank and privilege that Tom Paris earned?
Well, and for that matter, does anybody who was in the Maquis, do they? Well, okay, look, if we're going to give an excuse to Tom Paris, we can say he was a Maquis for like a matter of hours.
And a bad one at that, because he was caught.
Yeah, he's not very good at it. Right. So his background really is Starfleet in that respect.
So Chakotay was an officer.
So, but here's the thing: are you going around to these people and you're saying like, okay, now you're on a Starfleet ship, you no longer even have a Maquis ship, and there is no Maquis to go back to because we're 70,000 light years away from everything. Now we're going to give you this nice uniform, we're going to give you this nice comm badge, so we're always in touch and we know where you are. By the way, you get to choose if you differentiate yourself with this thing that singles you out as, this criminal, essentially, in the eyes of Starfleet, or you could not do that. And I think I might be like, yeah, you know what? I'm outnumbered here. I think maybe I'll not do that. If they figure out that I was Maquis, fine. But now the job is just to get home.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing, though, that I really, really liked in this episode, and I know that it's probably not as focused on maybe in this episode or future episodes, I don't know, but I really do like Kes's sensitivity with the Doctor. It just really stood out to me that in the A story, you have, Janeway's growth and B'Elanna's growth, etc. But then you have this really wonderful quiet moment with Kes asking the Doctor what his name was. Knowing and trying to personalize him and treat him something other than being just ones and zeros, actually treating him like a sentient being. I think that's really important, and I'm really interested to see where that goes.
There's an innocence there that's really nice because we don't know a whole lot about the Ocampa evolution. We don't know a whole lot about their technical ability because, so much was given to them by the caretaker. This is sort of happened. They just sort of live their lives there. But she has this innate curiosity that makes her a little different from the rest of those poor doomed Ocampa, who I feel very badly about still. I don't think it's going to be a good future for them. But everybody else is essentially introduced to the idea because they're Starfleet, because they're on the ship, like, oh, look, this is a piece of technology that we have. This is a thing that we can turn on and off like a light switch because our Doctor is dead. That is the tool. This defines what this thing is. She gets to come at it from a completely different perspective, completely different understanding. Look, here's something that I can interact with. Here's someone who has a personality, as prickly as it may be. And it's a really lovely way to approach the unknown. And it's a very Star Trek way to approach the unknown. Yeah.
Yes. And the interesting thing is that she, being the outsider, the only other true outsider aside from Neelix, she is the one that humanizes the Doctor and actually gives him the time of day, quote unquote, where Harry's too busy, or Tom's too busy, or the bridge is too busy, or the captain's too busy to literally fix the only Doctor they have on the ship during a period of crisis that's affecting the physicality of the crew.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, don't you think he would be priority number one? Get our Doctor back to full form?
You would think, yeah. You would think there would be a whole crew working on that.
Punching your way through is so predictable. What would have happened if they needed to breakdance their way through?
Well, here we are, John, at the end of episode 2 of Voyager. And it's just a pair of us guys talking about Parallax. I don't do it nearly as entertainingly as you do. But maybe that joke, 47, has been just played out.
That might be the end of it, yeah. And it is the end of it, fortunately, for us and for all of you. Yeah.
It is. So as we do in all of our episodes of Mission Log, Voyager is no different. We're going to take a look at 1, does this episode hold up for John and myself? And 2, what are the morals and meanings and messages that we're able to find, if any, at the end of our deliberation? And I think we were able to land on a few, but I'm really, really interested to see, first of all, being the second episode that we've watched so far in Voyager, how does this episode hold up for you?
This is one of those episodes that is good, but it's not great. It is definitely a departure from where we've been with DS9, since this is the most straightforward kind of there's a problem and we have to solve it sort of plot, and that was very common when you're talking about TOS or TNG or some early DS9. But we've been in this late DS9 period where it's all about drama, politics, etc. This is an episode that is heavy on technobabble, which I'm fine with when you're using an analogy like the ice on the pond to, break through that. But we had, as you pointed out, Norman, two big chunks of exposition. The choice I have to make at the end, the real Voyager or the reflection of Voyager, that felt a bit like manufactured drama, and then it's just sort of dropped. Like, did we really feel Torres learning something there, respecting Janeway's decision, or Janeway learning something about Torres, and that? Like, it was just sort of drama for drama's sake, you know. There are character moments to be found, but even then, not particularly revelatory ones. So what's odd, you know, again, to me, is just the speed of getting B'Elanna promoted, even after her tense meeting with Janeway and breaking Carrie's nose. And, you know, the Doctor adds a little bit of comedic relief, but then those video effects don't exactly hold up.
No, they do not.
They don't. And honestly, you know, this is an episode that I do not remember from my last rewatch of the series. And at the same time, I felt like as soon as the transmissions started, that we started hearing coming from the Singularity, I mean, back in Act 1, I knew it was Voyager, and I knew it would be some kind of time distortion. Like, it just felt very obvious to me. So I'll tell you what I think this episode does do well. In the same way that, like, The Naked Now on TNG, that was not a great episode when you take it out of context. It does allow us, though, to just mostly kind of sit with these new characters that we're getting used to. We get to be with them for a moment. We get to know them bit by bit. For that, the episode is a success, but I can't really confidently say that it holds up. Because if all I'm getting out of it is B'Elanna gets promoted, a problem was solved, okay, well, so B'Elanna presumably will just have that rank for the rest of the series now. So, okay, that was just a matter of mechanics to get us there, you know? Yeah. So it's not that there's anything particularly wrong with the episode. It's just, it's something that won't really hold high esteem for me. What about you, sir?
Wait, so just to understand, so the Naked Time, or the Naked Now, this is the TNG episode, so we're not supposed to believe that polywater intoxication affects an android's biological circuitry?
Oh, he was fine. He was fine the whole time.
I have so many questions about how that works. But anyway, that's not this. We're talking about Voyager. We're talking about Parallax. This is kind of like literally like the Shakedown episode. I mean, how many times did people get flung across the bridge every single time they tried to pull away from,
so often,
you know, the anomaly?
Yeah.
But a lot of characters were kind of like, again, like figuratively shaken into place. Like Janeway started to be shaken into the style that I think that we're coming to actually know very quickly from the way that Kate performs Janeway, and all these different elements of the crew, like the Maquis trying to like shake up the normality of how a ship functions with this hint of mutiny, you know, with Seska in Javan. I think that's his name, Javan or Javan. With Chakotay. Where did Chakotay's loyalties lie? He really wants to help the captain, but the captain's looking down her nose, her Starfleet nose, at the lesser-than Maquis, you know, until the very, very, very end, where I think that she's trying to make amends by... I think that's what B'Elanna is in this episode. She's kind of like a peace offering to both sides, saying that we can still play in the same sandbox and do right by each other. It just takes the first person to admit that, and that first person to admit it has to be the captain. Yeah. You know, to say that I was wrong. So it's a nice, I think that B'Elanna was a nice olive branch to it. And the characters that are starting to shape up a little bit now. Roger Beltran, I think his performance as Chakotay is like Robert Beltran. Yeah. I think he's found Chakotay's voice. I think B'Elanna is still a little rough. You know, still trying to find, Roxanne's still trying to find, you know, who B'Elanna is or how the half human and half Klingon work. So I like the growth that we're seeing in a lot of these characters and where they're going. I still think that maybe Garrett's a little stodgy, a little stiff in his role, but I think that's just because going all the way back to what Janeway said in Caretaker, you know, at ease, Benson, or else you're going to sprain something. So maybe he's just leaning into that a little too much.
And he's the kid. He's the kid.
Yeah, you know, he's the new one, right? You know, to the industry. I think that you're right. 100% right on the Doctor effects. I'm sure that they were fine for then, but they really, really, really date the episode. I mean, they are bad. Yeah. Let's just be honest. You know, they are terrible effects. And they kind of pull you out of the comedic aspect of what the Doctor's going through, because what he's actually going through is really bad in the course of what he needs to do for the crew. He can't treat anybody, you know, in this episode because of the way his physicality is, or lack thereof. So I think that it's growing pains. We're going through the growing pains of the show, trying to figure out who these characters are, what their motivations are, what the voices are for these characters. I'm sure we haven't landed on exactly the cruising speed for a lot of them. I think Tom's still a little keyed up. I think that Robbie's still playing him just a little too on the nose. I think that, say, someone like Anelix, it was a weird thing that he did with Kes, especially since Kes is far younger and probably far more naive, and he took kind of like the creepy older boyfriend type of routine with her there.
But I will say that, what's interesting about Kes is that, yes, the Ocampa are short-lived and they have this naivete, this innocence about them. Kes as a character, though, has this great poise and ease, which is really nice to see, particularly as a contrast to Neelix, because he's so kind of designed to be comedic, but Kes and as embodied here by Jennifer Lean has this real sort of calming effect where she feels like she belongs there. She
has a very old soul aspect to her. Where Neelix is just kind of like a spinning top just bouncing around from bumper to bumper to bumper.
Which is probably why it's even more annoying to see a scene like that, the mansplaining scene with her,
You see Tammy.
Yeah.
So,
because you feel like you could just literally hand her like, oh, here, read this pad on it. And then she was like, oh, I get it now.
Exactly.
Whereas Neelix is like, he's the one who needs the explanation, the condescending explanation. Okay, but so to me, this is an episode that, like I said, has some character moments that are good and necessary, but it is also a heavy technobabble. Here's the problem, solve the problem episode. So do you pick up messages, morals, meanings in this?
Well, there's definitely, and maybe it's because in a former life, I had to manage a lot of people. So in my former career, 21 years as a graphic designer, 17 of those was at the director position, a creative director position. And managing people, this is the moral that I landed on. Management 101. Managing people is a lot more than just assigning the right person for the right job. Now, that's academic, and it works most of the time, but it's also about finding the right fit. Making sure people and personalities are in the right place, challenging each other, at the same time, being able to get a lot of personal growth and motivation out of that person, not coddling their expectations, but empowering those expectations to see who's going to benefit from solving the problem without micromanaging somebody or overseeing somebody because you just don't think that they are as good as the responsibility that you've thrust upon them. So that's where I think Janeway was with Kes early on. Like, you want the job? Take the job. Your idea, you run with it. Let's see what happens. Let's see if you can actually do something for the crew. Where, in contrast to that with Torres, Torres is still Maquis and Kes wasn't. So she's looking down from Starfleet on high and saying, how can these people function if they don't have the discipline and the training to do so? So that's a little bit of a juggling act there. I like how, as a moral meaning or message, I like how Janeway examines that about herself in this episode. And I think she does that by the exposition of, let's talk this out. Let's try and find a solution to the problem. And in doing so, warp particles. No, in doing so, I had to do it.
You did.
They found a bridge to understanding this miscommunication that there is probably globally across the ship, where people, they want to do the right thing because who doesn't want to go home? Versus the only people that are qualified to do it on the ship are the people that are trained to do it for Starfleet. That doesn't necessarily hold true. Talent is talent. And being able to spot talent and put talent in the right place, that's the sign of a good leader. That's not necessarily the sign of a trained leader or a leader that has to follow the book or protocol. That's somebody who's like Chakotay's like, she's the best damn engineer I've ever had, ever. Right?
Yeah.
That's just spotting talent and using that talent to its full ability. So I like that there are underdogs that are being fought for, and the talent is going to start presenting itself because when you don't really have a lot of resources, the cream rises to the top really fast. So that's kind of like where I landed with this episode. Yes, a lot of growing pains, a lot of feeling itself out still, a lot of fruit that needs to be shaken off the tree to find the low-hanging fruit to pick. But in the end, I think that it's really about managing expectations. How about you, John?
Yeah, I'm not far off from where you are, because I feel like it's still testing the waters for everybody. And it's not like there's a huge moral dilemma for Janeway to face here, or really anybody else in the crew. But they do have to pull together. They have to work together. They have to solve the problem. And they're still feeling each other out for where they all fit. And, it just happens that this crew is made up of people from these vastly different sets of experiences. And yeah, every crew, go back to the Enterprise D, made up of people with different experiences. But for the most part, they are all there with that Starfleet background. They all have at least somewhat similarly aligned reasons for being there. This one's different. They're all trying to figure out and feel their way around how they will come together as a crew. But I do, right along the lines with where you are, I feel like there's this message of not underestimating the people around you. Janeway has to set aside her prejudice. You spell it out very clearly, that she is prejudiced about the people on her crew who are Maquis. Now, they're not particularly making it easy for her, because, as you also pointed out, you got Maquis logos, rank pips on you, and then you've got a couple of people openly talking about mutiny, So, but at the same time, Janeway has to show a little bit of trust and meet them halfway. Carrie's got to put aside his prejudice. B'Elanna has got to put aside her prejudice about what this is all about and who these people are and what the reality is, as opposed to her not fitting in with her experience at the Academy. There's also something really interesting and revealing about B'Elanna's own kind of self-sabotage, which I wonder if that sort of thing will play out later in the series for her, because that's a chunk of her life that she told herself she was not cut out for. She did everything herself to remove any opportunity that she had at Starfleet. And those moments were touched on too much, but it was nice to see Janeway kind of come back at her with a little more factual information to get her to be a little more introspective. But point is, they start to put aside these prejudices so they can actually get the job done. And then, I'm left with this question that I still have. Can someone grow into a role that's given them? It remains to be seen exactly how B'Elanna will grow into that role. And what we know is the production reality that the character is there. Was this just a little bump in the road, or is this something that informs the character from here on out? There's something very gratifying about seeing somebody who is seemingly unlikely given a chance. I will still ask myself, what is the right balance? What is the right balance between talent and knowledge versus composure and leadership ability? Which one outweighs the other to put the right person in the role?
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows in the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, time and again.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Adam Brusky, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, John Mann, Mike Richards, and Mike Schabel. 2 ships diverged in the woods, and I chose the one that I thought I might be able to land on. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.